In the busy city of Mbale, Amara lived a life that looked perfect from the outside. She had a husband, Kwame, who everyone thought was loyal, and together they were raising their daughter in what seemed like a happy home. Amara believed her marriage was strong, built on years of love and trust. But one evening, everything she thought she knew came crashing down. Kwame sat her down, his voice cold and unapologetic, and told her he was leaving. He had fallen in love with someone else. Amara's heart sank when she heard the name, Zinzi. She was a much younger woman, barely older than Amara's own daughter. The shock hit her like a storm. Her chest tightened, her hands trembled, and her world blurred with tears. How could the man she had given her life to betray her so easily? How could he trade years of loyalty for the shine of youth? For a moment she felt like begging him to stay, to remember their love, their family, their history. But pride held her back. Amara wiped her tears, lifted her head, and swallowed the pain. She would not kneel to a man who could so easily replace her. That night, as the silence filled her home, Amara realized her marriage was shattered beyond repair. The betrayal cut deep, but she made a quiet promise to herself. She would not let this break her completely. She would stand, even with a broken heart, and one day show the world her strength. Kwame walked through the markets of Mbale with Zinzi by his side, as if she were a crown jewel he had just discovered. He held her hand tightly, showing her off to everyone, smiling with pride as if he had achieved something great. Zinzi wore bright clothes, jewelry that sparkled in the sun, and a smile full of arrogance. She carried herself like she was the queen of the city, certain that all eyes were on her. People did look, but their whispers told a different story. Some shook their heads in disbelief, some laughed quietly, and others pitied Amara, who had been left behind after giving Kwame her best years. Amara's name lingered in every corner. How could he leave such a good woman, some asked. All for a girl almost the same age as his daughter. The gossip spread like fire, and Amara's pain became a public wound. She stayed silent, but her silence carried dignity. While people expected her to cry in the streets or chase after Kwame, she kept her head high, even though her heart was breaking. Zinzi, on the other hand, thrived on the attention. She walked past Amara's shop more than once, deliberately swaying her hips, laughing loudly, making sure Amara could see her. With a smirk, she called Amara an old woman, and whispered to her friends that youth always wins. She believed beauty was enough to secure her place by Kwame's side forever. She never noticed the way people looked at her with hidden laughter, seeing her as foolish and shallow. Kwame, blind with desire, ignored the whispers and the shame. He gave Zinzi gifts, money and attention, thinking he had started a new, exciting life. But beneath the surface, cracks were already forming. While he paraded his new bride, Amara buried her pain quietly, carrying her suffering with grace. She did not fight for him, she did not insult Zinzi, and she did not bow down to humiliation. Instead, she allowed her silence to speak louder than any insult could. The marketplace, which once celebrated Kwame as a respected man, now saw him as weak, a fool who traded loyalty for vanity. People who once admired him now laughed behind his back, saying he had lost his sense. But he was too blinded to hear. Zinzi continued to mock Amara's age, thinking she had won a battle of love and youth. Yet deep down, life had its own way of turning stories around, and her mocking words would one day return to her like a cruel echo. For now, Amara's heart remained wounded, but her soul was unbroken. She watched from a distance, not with jealousy, but with quiet strength, knowing one truth that Zinzi could not understand. Youth may shine for a moment, but character lasts forever. Amara's nights were heavy with tears, but every morning she forced herself to rise. The house felt empty without the warmth of her marriage, yet she refused to let her sorrow swallow her. In the quiet of those painful days, she remembered her late father's voice. He had always told her, "When the world breaks you, don't sit in the dust. Stand, wipe yourself, and build again." Those words became her anchor. Instead of running after Kwame or wasting her energy in bitterness, Amara turned to the one thing that gave her purpose: her father's tailoring shop. It was a small place, tucked in a busy street of Mbale, once filled with the hum of sewing machines and the smell of new fabric. She had learned to stitch there as a young girl, her father guiding her hands with patience and love. Standing in that little shop again, Amara felt her father's spirit close to her, whispering strength into her broken heart. She poured herself into the work. Day and night she cut, stitched, and designed with a fire that pain had ignited inside her. Slowly, her hands stopped trembling with grief and began creating beauty out of fabric. Customers noticed the care she put into every dress, every outfit. Word spread about Amara's skill, and soon women from across Mbale came, not just to buy clothes, but to admire the woman who stitched her dignity into every thread. As weeks turned into months, the shop grew beyond what her father had left. Amara hired young girls, some widowed, some abandoned like her, and taught them the art of tailoring. What started as a small family shop began to look like a rising fashion house. The women who worked with her didn't just earn a living, they found courage through her. Amara was no longer just a customer's tailor, she was becoming a leader, a mother, and an inspiration. Meanwhile, those who once whispered about her betrayal now whispered about her strength. People in Bale pointed at her shop with admiration, saying, "That is Amara's place, the woman who turned her heartbreak into gold." Her name carried respect in markets and homes. Where Kwame flaunted his young bride, Amara built something lasting, something no one could take from her. Her pain had not disappeared, but she had learned to turn it into fuel. Every stitch was a reminder that she was not defined by the man who left her, but by the strength that lived within her. With each dress that left her shop, she stitched a new identity for herself, one of resilience, dignity, and hidden power. And without realizing it, Amara was laying the foundation for an empire that would soon be admired across the region. Months passed, and the shine of Kwame's new life began to fade. At first, he had showered Zinzi with gifts, dinners, and parties, trying to prove to everyone that leaving Amara was the best decision of his life. But reckless spending has a way of catching up, and soon his savings began to dry up. The man who once stood proud in the markets of Mbale now found himself counting coins, struggling to keep up with Zinzi's endless demands. Zinzi, who had once walked the streets with her head high, began to show cracks in her smile. She had entered the marriage dreaming of wealth and comfort, but now the reality was different. Arguments filled their home. She accused Kwame of failing to give her the life he had promised, while Kwame grew frustrated, realizing too late that beauty could not feed him, nor could pride pay his debts. The whispers in town grew louder. People who once laughed at Amara now laughed at him, calling him a fool who had traded gold for dust. While Kwame's world fell apart, Amara's life was blooming. Her fashion shop had grown into something bigger than she ever dreamed. Her designs carried elegance and strength, attracting women from different towns and even other regions. Investors began to notice her work, offering partnerships to expand her brand. Her name was no longer just known in Bale, it was traveling beyond, carried by every dress stitched with her vision. She walked through the same markets where she once felt humiliated, but now the air was different. People no longer whispered with pity, they greeted her with respect. Some even told their daughters, "Learn from Amara. She is proof that pain can build queens." Every compliment was like a quiet victory over the shame she once endured. Life had flipped in ways no one expected. Kwame, who once mocked Amara by flaunting his young bride, now avoided the markets, embarrassed by his fall. Zinzi, once full of pride, now sulked beside him, realizing that the crown she thought she had stolen was nothing but a burden. And Amara, the woman they had laughed at, stood taller than ever, glowing with the dignity of someone who had fought through fire and come out shining. Fate has a strange way of teaching lessons. Kwame had chosen lust over loyalty, recklessness over responsibility, and now he was paying the price. Amara, who chose silence, patience, and hard work, was being lifted higher than even she imagined. The story that once seemed like her ending was only the beginning of her rise. And the same people who once whispered about her broken marriage now spoke of her empire with admiration, calling her a woman of power, a woman who turned betrayal into destiny. One quiet morning, Amara was arranging fabrics in her shop when her daughter Lebo rushed in with tears streaming down her face. Amara's heart tightened. She wiped her hands and pulled her daughter close, whispering gently, "What is it, my child?" Through sobs, Lebo confessed she had fallen deeply in love with a man named Tay. Her words were trembling, yet her eyes carried the weight of truth. She wasn't just talking about a simple crush. She loved him, and her heart was already tied to his. Amara held her daughter's hands, asking softly, "Who is this man?" When Lebo spoke his name again, Tay, Amara thought it was just another young man from the city. But when Lebo begged her to meet him, Amara agreed, unaware that fate was about to deliver a cruel twist. That evening, when Tay walked into their home, Amara's breath caught in her chest. She stared at him in shock, her mind refusing to believe what her eyes were seeing. Tay was none other than Zinzi's younger brother, the same Zinzi who had stolen Kwame, the same girl who mocked her in the streets, the same woman who had been the symbol of her deepest humiliation. Felt like time stopped. The room grew heavy with silence. Lebo, innocent and glowing with love, looked at her mother with hopeful eyes. "Mama, this is the man I want to marry," she said softly. Amara's heart twisted. She wanted to scream, to forbid the union, to tell her daughter the bitter truth of what this family had cost her. But when she looked at Tay, she saw no arrogance, no mockery, only sincerity. He greeted her with respect, his eyes steady, as if he knew nothing of the wounds his sister had caused. Amara was torn between past and present. Part of her wanted to protect Lebo from repeating her pain, but another part whispered her father's wisdom. Do not punish the innocent for the sins of others. Tay was not Zinzi. He was a man who loved her daughter honestly. Yet the irony was unbearable. Life had tied her family to her rival's bloodline in the most intimate way. The news spread quickly in Bale. People gasped at the cruel knot fate had tied. Some pitied Amara, others laughed at the irony. But everyone waited to see what she would decide. Would she reject her daughter's happiness because of her painful past, or would she rise above and prove once again that her strength was greater than bitterness? That night, Amara sat alone, her heart heavy but her spirit calm. She whispered to herself, "Perhaps this is not a curse but a test. If I can face this with dignity, then nothing in this world can ever break me again." She did not know what the future held, but she knew one truth: love had come knocking on her daughter's door, and this time it carried the face of fate itself. The day of Lebo's wedding arrived, and the city of Mbale buzzed with excitement. The streets were decorated, drums echoed through the air, and neighbors gathered to witness the union. Amara stood by her daughter's side, her heart filled with mixed emotions. At first, when Lebo told her she wanted to marry Tay, Amara's heart had resisted. The memories of Zinzi's cruelty, the humiliation she had endured, and the pain of her broken marriage all came flooding back. But in the end, Amara chose her daughter's happiness over her own wounds. She told herself, "I will not let my past steal her future." Lebo looked radiant, dressed in one of her mother's finest creations. The gown wasn't just fabric, it carried Amara's love stitched into every seam. As the ceremony began, joy filled the air, and Amara tried to focus only on her daughter's glowing smile. But then the moment came that tightened every chest in the room. Zinzi arrived. Zinzi entered the celebration dressed grandly, her head held high, but her steps were slower than usual. She was no longer just Kwame's young bride parading through the markets. Today, she was the sister-in-law of the bride, and that meant she was now tied to Amara by family blood. For the first time since her arrogant laughter, Zinzi was forced to stand face-to-face with the woman she once mocked and humiliated. The crowd noticed the tension. Whispers rippled through the guests as Zinzi walked toward Amara. Her eyes flickered with discomfort, her smile stiff. Tradition required her to greet the elder woman of the bride's family with respect. That elder was none other than Amara. Slowly, with everyone watching, Zinzi bent her head and greeted Amara, her voice barely steady. It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it felt like the world had turned upside down. Amara did not gloat, nor did she let her pain show. She simply nodded with calm dignity, her presence alone a reminder of who truly held honor. The same woman Zinzi had once called old, was now the matriarch she had to honor publicly. It was humiliation wrapped in ceremony, and the people of Mbale did not miss the irony. Some whispered, "Fate has a sharp tongue," while others smiled, knowing that life had delivered its lesson without Amara needing to lift a finger. Throughout the day, Zinzi avoided Amara's gaze, her laughter quieter, her pride swallowed. Amara, however, stood tall beside her daughter, her strength shining brighter than any jewel. The wedding became more than a union of two hearts. It became a symbol. It showed that dignity outlives arrogance, and that those who mock others may one day bow before them. When the drums played louder and the bride and groom exchanged vows, Amara's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow but of pride. Her daughter had found love, her family had grown, and without revenge or anger, she had witnessed her rival humbled before her. It was not just a wedding, it was fate writing justice in the most unexpected way. When Lebo gave birth to her first child, the entire family came together to celebrate. The baby boy was tiny, soft, and perfect, and when Amara held him in her arms, her heart overflowed with joy. Tears ran down her cheeks as she whispered, "My grandson," with a voice full of pride and love. The room was filled with singing, laughter, and prayers of blessing. It was a day that marked new life, new hope, and new beginnings. But for Zinzi, the moment was nothing short of a nightmare. She stood among the family members, her smile forced, her heart pounding as the truth sank in. That baby boy, so pure, so innocent, was not just Lebo's child, he was also her step-nephew. And because Amara was Lebo's mother, that made Amara her step-grandmother-in-law. The very woman she had mocked and humiliated, the woman whose husband she had stolen, was now tied to her forever through the most sacred of bonds, family. The irony cut deep. Zinzi remembered all the times she had laughed at Amara, calling her old and useless. She remembered walking through the markets proudly on Kwame's arm, certain she had won. Yet here she was, standing awkwardly in the corner, while the same woman she mocked was being celebrated as the proud grandmother of her stepchild. The whispers in Mbale began again, louder this time and filled with amusement. "Did you hear?" People chuckled. "Zinzi's step-grandmother is Amara, the same woman she once insulted." Laughter spread through the markets, in the streets, even in the homes of neighbors. They said fate had a wicked sense of humor, and this was proof. Some even joked that Zinzi had tied her own rope when she married Kwame, because now she would never escape Amara's shadow. Amara, however, remained calm and graceful. She did not mock Zinzi, nor did she rub the truth in her face. Instead, she poured her love into her grandson, smiling with a dignity that spoke louder than words. The child became her crown, proof that life always finds a way to honor those who suffer in silence. Zinzi, on the other hand, could not escape her shame. Every family gathering, every birthday, every celebration would now remind her of this cruel twist. She could not push Amara aside because Amara was family. No matter how much she tried to hide it, the whole of Mbale already knew, and they laughed whenever her name was mentioned. What she once thought was her greatest victory had turned into her deepest humiliation. She had stolen a husband but lost her pride, and Amara, without seeking revenge, had been lifted higher than ever before. Holding her grandson close, Amara whispered to herself, "This is my blessing. This is my justice." The world had mocked her once, but now it mocked Zinzi, and fate had written the ending with perfect irony. Kwame's downfall did not happen overnight. It came slowly, piece by piece, until he was left with nothing. The business ventures he had chased after leaving Amara all failed. Money slipped through his fingers like sand, and the people who once praised him began to disappear. Friends who had cheered for his new marriage stopped answering his calls. The respect he once carried in Mbale was gone, replaced with whispers of pity and laughter behind his back. Home things were no better. Zinzi, who had once smiled proudly at his side, grew restless. She had married him for comfort and luxury, but now there was none to give. Their arguments filled the house daily. She mocked him for his failures, reminding him that he was no longer the man she thought she had stolen from Amara. The same pride that once made her walk through the markets with her head high was now shattered. And finally one day she left him too, slipping away without looking back. Kwame was broken. He had lost everything: his wealth, his pride, his so-called friends, and even the woman he had betrayed his family for. For the first time in his life, he realized what he had thrown away. And so, with shame pressing down on him, he did the one thing he swore he would never do. He went back to Amara. He arrived at her home one evening, clothes wrinkled, face tired and eyes desperate. When Amara opened the door, he fell to his knees, his voice shaking. "Amara," he pleaded, "I made a mistake. See it now. Please forgive me. Me come home. You are my only true family." His words were heavy with regret, but Amara's heart did not move the way it once did. She looked at him quietly, her face calm, her spirit unshaken. This was the man who had broken her heart without a second thought, who had paraded another woman before her eyes, who had left her to cry alone in the dark. And now he was begging at her feet. But Amara was no longer the broken woman he had left behind. She was stronger, wiser, and far more powerful than before. Her voice was steady, carrying no anger, only truth. "Kwame," she said, "I am not your home anymore. Built my own. You chose your path, and so did I. Mine led me to strength, and yours led you here." Kwame wept, clutching her feet, but Amara did not bend. She gently pulled away and closed the door, leaving him outside with his regrets. The story spread quickly across Mbale. People whispered with awe about Amara's dignity. The man who once abandoned her had come crawling back, but she did not take him in. She had risen so high that even his apology could not touch her. And in that moment, Amara proved that true power is not in revenge, but in standing tall while those who betrayed you fall to the ground. Amara's journey, born from heartbreak, soon grew into something far greater than she ever imagined. What started as a small tailoring shop in Mbale blossomed into a fashion house that stretched across borders. Her designs carried more than beauty, they carried a story, threads of resilience, stitches of dignity, and patterns of hope. Each dress, each outfit told the world that pain could be transformed into power. Orders poured in from different cities, and soon from countries beyond Uganda. Her name was spoken in fashion shows, in boardrooms, and in homes where women dreamed of strength like hers. Amara's brand became more than clothes. It became a movement. People wore her designs not just for elegance but as a symbol of courage. She was no longer introduced as Kwame's former wife. She was celebrated as Amara, the visionary, the woman who turned betrayal into empire. But Amara did not stop at success for herself. She remembered the nights she cried alone, feeling abandoned and worthless. She remembered the weight of rejection, and she vowed that no other woman should feel powerless because of a man's betrayal. She opened her doors to widows, single mothers, and young women who had been left behind. She trained them in tailoring, design, and business. She taught them that revenge was small, but building something lasting was powerful. Her words echoed in workshops. "Do not waste your tears on those who walked away. Use them to water the seeds of your future." The women she mentored carried her message far and wide. They, too, started their own shops and businesses. Some went back to school. Some raised their children with renewed strength. And everywhere they went, they carried Amara's spirit. She had not just built a fashion house. She had built an army of empowered women. Meanwhile, those who had once mocked her could no longer deny her greatness. The same markets where people whispered about her shame now displayed her brand proudly. Posters of her designs covered walls, and her name was spoken with admiration. She walked with grace through streets that had once laughed at her, and now they bowed in respect. Kwame, watching from the shadows, realized he had lost more than a wife. He had lost the chance to stand beside a queen. Zinzi, too, could not escape the comparison. Wherever she went, people reminded her of Amara's greatness, whispering about how life had humbled her and exalted the woman she once mocked. But Amara carried no bitterness. Her success was her answer. She had risen from betrayal to brilliance, from heartbreak to legacy. And when people spoke of her, they no longer said, "The woman Kwame left." They said, "The queen who built an empire." Her story spread across Africa, not just in fashion magazines but in the hearts of women who needed hope. Amara had shown the world that dignity and strength could turn the deepest wound into the brightest crown. She was no longer left behind. She had risen far ahead, shining like a queen in her own right. Years later, Amara sat in her garden with her grandson playing by her side. The boy was full of laughter, chasing butterflies and asking endless questions. When he grew tired, he came to rest in her lap. Amara stroked his hair gently and spoke in a soft, steady voice. Sometimes life takes away what you love, only to return it as wisdom and strength. What feels like the end can sometimes be the beginning of something greater. Her grandson looked up at her with wide eyes, not fully understanding, but sensing the weight in her words. For him, she was not just a grandmother. She was a queen, a woman whose presence carried dignity and power. The world knew her as the woman who had risen from betrayal and built an empire, but to him, she was simply Grandma Amara, the heart of the family. Zinzi, once proud and arrogant, now lived quietly in the background. The woman who had mocked Amara's old age now carried the burden of being tied forever to her as a step-grandmother. She avoided attention, her laughter silenced by the cruel twist of fate. Where she once walked with arrogance, she now walked in humility, forever overshadowed by the woman she tried to destroy. In Bale, Amara's name became more than just a name. It became a story, a legend told to young women in markets, schools, and homes. They spoke of the woman who refused to beg, who turned her tears into strength, and who showed that betrayal could be transformed into destiny. As the sun set, Amara smiled at her grandson, her heart full. She had lost a husband, but she had gained an empire, a legacy, and wisdom no one could ever take away.